All right, let's dive into a topic that's, well, way more complicated than it looks on the surface. What happens with your U.S. taxes when you sell agricultural land in India? If you're a U.S. citizen or resident with connections to India, this is a technical deep dive you'll definitely want to stick around for.
So, you've sold that piece of land. You might be thinking, great, the deal is done, and my U.S. tax situation should be pretty straightforward. But the reality? Oh, it's a tangled web of rules, and if you're not careful, it can lead to some pretty significant and surprising tax bills. Let's unravel this whole thing together. First things first, we have to talk about something called the saving clause. It's a key provision you'll find in almost every U.S. tax treaty. And the idea is simple. The U.S. reserves the right to tax its citizens and residents on their income from all over the world. It doesn't matter where you earned it. So, that profit from your Indian land sale? Yep, it's on the IRS's radar.
So, here's our roadmap. We're going to walk through this step by step. We'll start with why the U.S. can tax you in the first place, then get into how to classify your land, bust a really common myth about the Foreign Earned Income Exclusion, cover your reporting duties, figure out foreign tax credits, and then we'll tackle the big one, navigating the infamous zero tax trap.
Okay, so where do we even begin? The very first thing you have to do is classify your land correctly under U.S. tax law. This is a huge decision because it dictates exactly how you're going to report the sale.
Now, this slide really lays out the two main paths. Is your land a business property under Internal Revenue Code Section 1231, or is it a capital asset under Section 1221? For most people we're talking about, especially those holding ancestral land, you're almost certainly going to fall into that capital asset bucket. That means the gain gets reported on Form 8949 and then flows to Schedule D. All right, next up. Let's tackle a huge, and I mean huge, misconception that can get people into a lot of trouble. This is the idea that you can use the Foreign Earned Income Exclusion, or the FEIE, to wipe out the U.S. tax on your land sale. This is a major no-no, and I'm going to show you exactly why.
You know, it really all boils down to one simple but powerful word: earned. Under IRC Section 911, the tax code is super specific. Earned income is money you get for work you personally did. Your salary, your wages, professional fees. It's not profit you make just from owning an asset. And that's the whole point. The profit from selling your land, that comes from the property's value going up over time, not from any personal service you performed. In the language of the tax code, this is classic unearned or passive income.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Here it is, spelled out in black and white, straight from the Treasury's own regulations. It explicitly says, gains from the sale of capital assets are not earned income. It really doesn't get any clearer than that. Trying to use the FEIE here is just fundamentally misunderstanding the law.
Okay, so the FEIE is off the table. Let's move on to what you actually have to do. The moment that money from the sale hits your bank account in India, a whole new set of U.S. reporting requirements are triggered.
Think of this as your immediate action plan. It's a three-step checklist. First, you have to report any interest you're earning on those funds on Schedule B. Second, you have to check Yes on Schedule B to disclose that you even have a foreign account. And third, you have to file an FBAR, which is officially FinCEN Form 114. Now, this number is critical. $10,000. If the combined balance of all your foreign accounts crosses this threshold at any point during the year, even for just one day, you have to file an FBAR. It's not about the year-end balance or an average, it's a high watermark.
Let's look closer at Schedule B, Part 3, because it's basically the gateway to all your international reporting. Answering these questions correctly is so important. That yes to question 7A, which you'll have to check once the sale proceeds are deposited, is the trigger. And from there, it can lead to other forms, like the FBAR or even Form 3520 if a trust is involved.
So how do you avoid getting taxed twice on the same income? Well, this is where the foreign tax credit comes in. It's a dollar-for-dollar credit for taxes you paid to India. But there's a catch, and it's a big one. It all comes down to where the income is sourced.
See this formula? This is what determines the maximum credit you can claim. And the key variable, the linchpin of the whole thing, is foreign source taxable income. If that number is zero, it doesn't matter how much tax you paid to India, your credit on your U.S. return will also be zero.
And this is where things get really interesting. The general rule, IRC Section 865A, says the gain is sourced to the seller's residence. For you, that's the U.S. If that rule applied, your foreign tax credit would be dead on arrival. But there's a vital exception for real property in IRC Section 862A5. This rule sources the gain to where the property is located, in this case, India. This exception is what makes the foreign tax credit possible at all.
So, let's recap. We know the U.S. is going to tax the gain, and we know a foreign tax credit is possible because of the sourcing rule. Sounds like we're in the clear, right? Well, hold on. This brings us to our final hurdle, and it's a doozy. It's what we call the zero tax trap, and it's caused by a mismatch between U.S. and Indian law. Here's the setup for the trap. Under Indian law, the sale of what's defined as rural agricultural land is not even considered a taxable event. It's not treated as a capital asset, so no Indian capital gains tax is due.
Okay, let's use an example to see how this trap springs shut. Say a U.S. person sells rural agricultural land in India and has a gain of $500,000. Under U.S. law, that's a taxable capital gain, plain and simple.
But because of that special exemption in Indian law, the capital gains tax paid to the government of India is exactly zero. Nothing.
So, what happens when you sit down to do your U.S. tax return? You get to Form 1116 for the foreign tax credit, you have to enter the amount of foreign tax you paid, and since you paid zero in India, the available credit is also zero.
And here's the painful result. You are now on the hook for the full U.S. tax on that $500,000 gain. That could easily be a tax bill of up to $119,000. That tax exemption in India didn't actually save you any money. It just ensured that the tax revenue went to Washington, D.C. instead of New Delhi.
This leads to a very logical question, right? Faced with this huge bill, can't you just say, fine, I'll voluntarily pay tax in India, even though I don't have to, just so I can generate a U.S. tax credit?
And the answer from the IRS is a very firm, very clear no. The Treasury Regulations specifically disallow credits for what they call non-compulsory amounts. Any payment you make that's more than what you legally owe in India is considered a voluntary contribution, not a creditable tax. Your legal liability was zero. Any payment you make is non-compulsory. And that is the finality of the trap.